Prime Minister Mark Carney is back from Washington with praise from the president, but no changes to U.S. tariffs. And today, Carney briefed Canada's premiers on what happened behind closed doors.
Everyone congratulated him on how he performed. Didn't matter what political stripe we came from. No one expected to sign a deal, but I'll tell you, it was a massive step forward.
I think it was a positive baselining of the new relationship. I think it was a positive establishment of mutual respect and understanding, and just the desire of Canada to get to bedrock here. What is your position, Mr. President?
And it's not just the premiers, as Trump himself gave Carney a glowing review last night and compared Carney with former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
This is a big step up. It's a good step up for Canada. I watched very closely. I thought he did really terrifically in the debates. I like him. You know, he's a nice man. We get along very well. We had a great meeting today. Really good. I think the relationship's going to be very strong.
Okay, so what did Mark Carney achieve behind closed doors? Minister of Foreign Affairs Mélanie Joly was part of the Canadian delegation that met with President Trump in Washington, and she joins me now. Minister, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be here.
The tone of the meeting seemed to be friendlier than some of the rhetoric in recent weeks and months, but the issue set remains largely unresolved at the end of the meeting. So what has fundamentally changed with the meeting between the Prime Minister and the President?
Well, the goal of the Prime Minister and the Canadian delegation was clearly to establish a new partnership on trade and security with the U.S. And so what you saw in the Oval Office and following afterwards through a lunch was really the fact that we're putting the new foundations to make sure that that partnership is able to come to fruition. And at the same time, you're really seeing a fresh start, a new approach between Canada and the U.S., which is really important.
So where does that go from here in terms of process? Do we look at like formal negotiating teams like we saw during the NAFTA renegotiations during the first Trump term? Or is it more ad hoc working groups, minister to minister? Like, what is the shape and structure of the process at this point?
Listen, David, I know that there's a lot of interest out there for a lot of the details, but in diplomacy, sometimes details are left behind closed doors. What I can tell you, though, is we will be working on this new partnership. We will be coming up as two sovereign nations, also approaching our trade relation, our security relations. And ultimately, we want to make sure that we can show the world how we're able to have an approach that is pragmatic and makes sense with the U.S. Because all countries on earth right now are in this position of negotiating with the U.S. And at the same time, we know that Canada is the biggest client of the U.S. And we also know that President Trump has been quite affected politically, I would say negatively, by what has happened on the trade side. And so we want to make sure ultimately that we are able to lead the conversations. But as you and I know, and all those watching us, the cabinet has not been appointed yet.
Right.
We're just 1 week after the elections. We got a strong mandate from Canadians to make sure that we would be defending Canada's sovereignty, protecting Canadian jobs, and making sure that we're able to handle the White House. And that's exactly what we'll do.
Right, but I guess what I'm trying to establish is we're not at the start of a formal renegotiation of CUSMA, are we? Or is it too early to know? I guess is my question, because it seemed like obviously this is the start of something. It just isn't clear to me what that something will be.
So what was the idea of the team was to make sure first and foremost that Prime Minister Carney and President Trump could meet. That they could have a personal relationship that is important. Why? Because we know that President Trump is the sole decider of what's going on within the U.S. administration. And therefore, that relationship is key. It was shown not only in the public through a media conference, but also afterwards through a how would say, productive conversation that is established now. They know each other. They got to spend time together. Now, the next steps are definitely to see what can be done on the trade side and on the security side. We've never done both together at once. We know we've been over-dependent on the U.S. for too long. We know, meanwhile, that we have to be closer to the U.K. We definitely have to be closer to the EU and closer to key Asian countries. And that's what we'll do. So we will have to not only bear in mind that we are in a trade war with the U.S. and that we, of course, want to lift tariffs, but we don't want to deal with damage to our economy that would be long-lasting. So that's why we want to have a much more holistic approach. And at the same time, what we want to do is to make sure that we keep our doors open to new opportunities that we can have with Europe and with Asia that will help us make sure that we cut that over-dependency. So that's our approach. Of course, we're a new government. Of course, not all ministers have been, like the new cabinet has not been appointed. And of course, we know that being the biggest client of the U.S., we can show the world how to approach the U.S. So it's a big agenda. There's a lot of ambition. But at the same time, I think we have the right prime minister and the right team to handle it.
Okay, the president did repeat his belief that Canada will be better off as the 51st state in the public portion yesterday in the Oval Office, though he suggested it more as this is a good idea rather than this is a clear goal of his administration. I'm just wondering how you and the Prime Minister and others interpreted those comments in the public meeting, and how did that align with what was said in the private conversations? I know you probably won't give very specific details on that, but how would you broadly describe the conversations around the 51st state agenda?
I think the Prime Minister's answer was just perfect in the sense that he said, first and foremost, Canada's not for sale. And the only owners of Canada, which are Canadians, are saying clearly that is not the case. And so we will be able to negotiate, but and deal with each other as two sovereign nations, period.
But the president doesn't seem to take no for an answer there, right? He kept saying never say never, never say never, and it was hard to tell if it was joking or serious. I mean, how did you view it based on the full meetings?
You're not the first colleague asking me, that question, but the question is, why don't you say what Prime Minister Carney said after he said never say never? Prime Minister Carney said never, never, never. So that's it. That's, Canada's not for sale. And when it comes to our sovereignty, it's not up for discussion, period. And I said that also when Marco Rubio was in Canada at the time. I said, we're proud people, hardworking people. We'll defend our sovereignty. And when you come here, you respect it, period. And what we know also is President Trump will be coming to Kananaskis and Alberta in June for the G7. So basically, the question of Canada's sovereignty is not on the table. And second, what is on the table is how can we handle a trade relationship at the time of a trade war? How can we handle a security relationship with the U.S. at a time where the U.S. has decided to not play the same role around the world, and therefore there's way much more instability in the world? And what are Canada's interests, and how can we protect jobs at home? How can prices go down? How can families be reassured? And how can ultimately we be strengthened as a country? And this is the mandate that Canadians gave us, and this is exactly the job that the Prime Minister, myself, and the government will be doing.
Do you have a sense from these conversations of the future direction of the tariffs that they've put in place? Whether there is a hope to get the fentanyl tariffs down, say, sometime soon, or just where these things go, the duration of those and the impact of those, the longer they last, the more painful it would be. So do you have a clear sense? I know there's so many tariffs, it's difficult to keep track of them all, but of just where they may go in terms of dropping some of this, because the president is not a man who likes to back down.
Well, a couple of things on that. We have to do a job at home to make sure that we take care of our own economy, that we create at-home jobs, that we are able to invest in our own defense sector, in our own manufacturing jobs, in making sure that these very smart, intelligent, very hardworking people working in the auto sector and in the aluminum and steel sector are able not only to continue to have a job, but that their families know that they can have a job even in that sector one day if they wish to. So we need to make sure that when we have this plan in mind, and we have a very ambitious plan, that people are not living in constant anxiety, that they're reassured, that they know that their government has their back. So that's what we'll do. Of course, the throne speech will be coming. The King Charles, our sovereign, will be coming to Canada. It will be a clear marker of Canada's sovereignty. We will be able to present our plan at that point. The cabinet will be established. Let's all remember the elections happened just a week ago. We already went to meet with the President of the United States. So things are really going quickly, efficiently. And at the same time, what we'll do is we want to have an approach that is general, I would say holistic, to negotiating. And so trying to not to fall into the trap of having, lifted a tariff and another one popping up. So our goal is to make sure that we are able to have that negotiation and able to have that clear plan to create jobs at home.
Right. Okay. So clearly, the tariffs, the security arrangement, the defense arrangements, the overall trade arrangement, we are at the beginning of a process, and where that ends and when there is some relief, it isn't clear at this point. But so much of it, based on what I saw yesterday and what you're saying today, kind of depends on that interpersonal relationship between the Prime Minister and the President,
we knew that.
right? So
we knew that.
So how would you describe where that is? Because he took shots at former Prime Minister Trudeau, at Chrystia Freeland yesterday, and I know Prime Minister Carney did not take the bait. But where do you see that relationship in terms of President Trump was apparently peppering him with questions in the private meetings? Where do you see that dynamic between the two leaders?
I think it's a positive dynamic. We're up to a fresh start, a new start. I think there was a willingness on the part of the Prime Minister, definitely, to make sure that that's the case, but also on the part of the President. Let's all remember also that President Trump right now is under pressure back home regarding tariffs. And there's a lot of frustration amongst the American public regarding the state of the economy. And at the same time, lots of senators are very uneased regarding his tariff strategy, if there is one. So that's why I think that, and I've had conversations after the Oval Office. I went to the Senate. I met with Senator Graham. I met with Senator Rich, which are both Republican senators, and I met with Senator Kane, also, who's from the Democrat side. I had, 2 hours, so I didn't have time to see many of them, but these are the ones that I'm close to and that I value the relationship with. And definitely the job of the future foreign minister will be to make sure that we keep this relationship. And meanwhile, the job that was my job also yesterday was to make sure that we knew, by talking through to many of the people that would be in the meeting at the White House, how it would go, try to prepare it the best way possible.
Right.
So I had conversations with Marco Rubio beforehand, and at the same time, I was in contact with many foreign leaders and foreign ministers around the world who had been in the White House in this very interesting, to say the least, setting of a press conference to understand what's the dynamic.
Right.
And President Trump answers questions. Prime Minister Carney was able to answer questions, but I must say also there's a lot of media in that meeting. It's quite chaotic. It's lots of questions. Questions come from all over, from media from all over the world, and the room becomes very heated. And it's quite an experience.
No, it was quite the thing to see. I was standing right behind Stephen Miller as this was all going on, and it was quite a crush of people in a room that is smaller than you think when you see it on television. but I guess as a final point, Minister, I know you were part of some of the trips to Mar-a-Lago and meetings with the administration over the last couple of months as the relationship has been quite challenged. How was it yesterday compared to when you went to Mar-a-Lago, compared to the early days of this conflict, shall we say? Has it improved? How substantively has it changed?
I think what is important is the context has changed, David. First, we just came out of an election. we won. Prime Minister Carney has a very strong mandate. He is a new politician. He was able to really change completely the course of the election and basically come out as a winner. And I think that Prime Minister Carney was able to, because of this performance, to really get the respect from President Trump, from himself. So that's one point. Second, this was happening at a time where Liberation Day, quote unquote, happened. And President Trump has gone through a lot of economic pressure, financial pressure, and I must say a lot of political pressure. And Canada is the biggest client of the U.S.
Right.
We're the nice, reliable, friendly neighbor. And so if all countries are going to the White House, or all countries want to go to the White House, and at this point, I think President Trump is in a mindset of wanting to have trade conversations and trade deals. He has said it many times, let's do a deal, let's do a deal. So in that context, I think things are very different than maybe 30 or 60 or 90 days ago. And that's why you were able to see the results you saw yesterday, which was a positive first meeting. But let's be frank, there will be a lot of emotions. Things may change, and there will be up and downs in the coming weeks, but we will be ready and we will hold steady.
Okay. Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly, appreciate the time today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, David.
Prime Minister Mark Carney says yesterday's meeting with President Donald Trump marks the beginning of a new relationship with the United States. Carney briefed Canada's premiers on what happened during that meeting through a virtual call today, and here's what some of them had to say about it.
I think everyone's feeling relatively good on the meeting yesterday. No one expected to sign a deal, but I'll tell you, it was a massive step forward that he went down there, and they seemed to be getting along quite well, and he said they were getting along, so I think this is huge compared to the last Prime Minister.
There's a consensus among the premiers that the Prime Minister did well yesterday to baseline a new relationship between Canada and the United States, that there was a sense of a different level of engagement, that the President is respectful of the Prime Minister.
Okay, the audio board came back, so that means the power panel is here. Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Supriya Dwivedi was an advisor to former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And here with me in the studio, Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst, and Jordan Leiknitz is a former NDP strategist. Hello, everybody. Can we all hear each other? All right, excellent, excellent. That's what we want to hear. Kate, well, let's start with you as we tried last time. What's your sense of where things stand now in the Canada-U.S. relationship after that meeting yesterday?
Well, I just got to say first, I don't think Conservatives are coming into the studio to sabotage the set. I know we have issues with the CBC, but this seemed genuine.
The audio board never would have come back, but here we are.
So on the meeting, I think it's a mix of good and bad and ugly. From the good, I think the tone was right. Prime Minister Carney was professional. There were no gaffes. The guardrail or the yardstick seemed to be "Don't get Zelensky." That didn't happen.
Right. Yep.
And I think that everybody, to the Premier's point, leaves yesterday's interaction with some optimism and hopefulness that things will get better. The bad, of course, is that we still have tariffs. Not that we were expecting an outcome of that yesterday, but there's a real economic pain associated with that. That a lot of people are feeling intimately. So that's the bad. The ugly is this is obviously a dramatic departure from the tone the Prime Minister took during the election campaign. I think we've come a far way between Trump wants to break us so he can own us, to the glowing promotional video that we saw emerge from the White House. So
but that came from the White House. That didn't come from the Liberals, right?
I think it was not dismissed by the Liberals. And so again, I think the tone was right, but it is noteworthy that it was a very different posture for the Prime Minister than we saw in the campaign. And there were a lot of people during the campaign that wanted to go into the White House and, give give the president a different kind of salute.
Right. Well, no, but we got to show this, okay? Because I saw this. We're all waiting, right, after the meeting happened to see what was going to happen on Fox Business News and on social media. And then the White House put this out. It's like a sizzle reel. Just have a look at this.
It's a great honor to have Prime Minister Mark Carney with us. A few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada, and I think Canada chose a very talented person, a very good person.
Thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, and I've been elected to transform Canada with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders. The history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And I look forward to finding those areas of mutual cooperation.
Jordan, that's like a trailer for a limited Netflix series starring Mark Carney and Donald Trump as they travel across North America. I mean,
and we're all a captive audience. We have to watch.
Yeah, like that. I expected many outcomes from that meeting yesterday. This video was not one of them. What do you make of this?
I do just want to have a moment for the communications acumen for whoever came up with the descriptor of him being a transformational president. I thought that was
deliberate,
both true and flattering enough to pass muster with Trump.
It's a deadly accurate word.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, look, I think that Carney, by all measures, had a successful day in Washington. You know, as Katie said, the bar was to not get Zelensky'd. He did not. He had presence. He was able to defend on the question of 51st state, I think, really adeptly. And overall, that was the bar for the meeting. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that the tariffs remain in place. And so we have to think that the goal now for Carney is to move the conversation out of that tit-for-tat tariff war and into a more formal trade agreement renegotiation process. So there was some positive signs yesterday in that the president was speaking about CUSMA in a positive way as a good agreement. That might suggest that we're headed down that path. But of course, there's a clock ticking. And the clock is that the longer these tariffs remain in place in Canada, the deeper and more lasting the economic impact will be here. So while I think this represents perhaps a bit of a reset in the relationship with Trump, certainly Trump himself seems to be articulating it that way, it remains to be seen how far down the field did the ball actually move on getting us into that renegotiation process so that we can get those tariffs off our industries.
Yeah, and Supriya, it isn't clear to me, even at this point, whether it is a full formal trade deal negotiation or whether it's a diplomatic exercise of conversation on security, defense, and trade and tariffs, and or if it's an appeasement process. But it did not go sideways yesterday, is a key takeaway, and seems like the two leaders have connected for what value that brings in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think Liberals should feel good, and I think Canadians should feel good about the fact that the meeting went honestly as well as it possibly could have. And to Kate's point, the fact that the bar was not to get Zelensky is kind of low, if I may, to clear, but he still managed to clear that. He got a sizzle reel, as you pointed out, and perhaps maybe a Netflix feature in the future with the two of them starring in some sort of buddy cop movie. But there is, Liberals should feel good, Canadians should feel good. The problem, I think, is that often with this president, there is no real rhyme or reason or method to the madness, right? So one day he could be saying something quite kind about someone, and the next day it's something quite different. And I think to Jordan's point about what Canadians should be looking towards, I think ultimately Canadians aren't really going to care if the White House is putting out nice looking sizzle reels of the Prime Minister. What they care about are the tariffs and the economic situation. So I think Team Carney and Canadians writ large can, be very proud in their Prime Minister, repping them well on the American stage. But I think now comes the real kind of hard work of trying to figure out how to move forward and getting these tariffs lifted.
Benzie, how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I think Supriya's right. It's about changing the tone. The tone has now changed. That is clear. And I think Mr. Carney did something that you do in good negotiations. You let the person you're negotiating with talk. And Mr. Trump loves to talk. And I thought when Mr. Carney did speak, he had a few artfully crafted sentences that I thought were very, very carefully thought out, including him mentioning that some pieces of real estate are not for sale, are never for sale,
Yeah.
including the White House. And then he mentioned Buckingham Palace because, since we're on Netflix right now, the president of the United States is a crown fetishist and loves the British monarchy. And that's why it's also very good for Canada that our head of state, King Charles III, will be here delivering a throne speech, because King Charles is going to deliver a throne speech that's going to say things like Canada will never be a 51st state. We've got to remove these tariffs. They're bad for the economy of Canada. They're bad for the economy of the United States. And Mr. Trump is going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's the king speaking. And he's not going to realize that it's the government's speech through the king. He's going to think that that's King Charles's comments directly. And I think Mr. Trump will listen to that. I really do. I mean, the fact that he said he had watched the debate, I thought that was like incredible, to think that on Thursday before Good Friday, there was the president watching the Canadian election debate. Presumably he only watched the English one.
Yeah, but Rob, there were so many little strange moments like that yesterday, right? Like, you know, I'm assuming he didn't watch that live. He must have watched it on a tape afterwards or something. But just your thoughts on seeing sort of the praise he had for Carney, like right out of the gate, because it was so weird, because the Truth Social post came out as Mark Carney's car was pulling in essentially to the White House, saying that, you know, we subsidize them and they're getting a free ride and all this. And then it turned into this glowing press conferencing, and then it ended with the sizzle reel. I mean, what do you make of that interpersonal dynamic?
So Jonathan Martin from Politico was visiting me at my office a couple of days ago from Washington, and he covers Trump and knows Trump very well, knows how the White House works. Some reporters have Trump's cell phone number, and you can actually get through to him sometimes still, which is insane. But anyway, Jonathan was saying to me that he thought that they would get along well because Donald Trump loves people like Mark Carney, people who are successful. You know, him being a former Bank of England governor and Bank of Canada governor, him having gone to Harvard, him having gone to Oxford, and him having made millions on Wall Street. Donald Trump loves people like that. So it was always gonna be off on a good foot because of that. He's his kind of guy, which is weird. I feel, and David, you were in the room in the Oval Office yesterday when Trump said praised Carney for his comeback, the Liberal Party's comeback, and I think I helped you win. Obviously, that means he's well aware that Carney campaigned as a never Trumper kind of guy, right?
Yeah. You know, Kate, it is interesting. Like, I don't know if the king's words when he reads the speech that is written for him by the Prime Minister's office will sway Donald Trump, but you have to wonder if Jerome Powell, his words today, the Federal Reserve Chairman, and he's warning of stagflation, right? High unemployment and high inflation because of all of the uncertainty that this tariff agenda and the trade approach of the president, like that is going to take root in the U.S. economy soon, and pain is going to enter the supply chain. Yeah,
you're already seeing modest but notable scale backs in terms of the tariff approach, and I think that the stock market and Wall Street and the economic realities of this approach are becoming very clear and apparent, not just to the administration, but to the voter base, right? And that motivates them to take some action. So definitely, I think that will be consequential in terms of whether or not this continues. And again, I think that yesterday was a good step forward. But these tariffs are very painful. The president did say he has no intention of removing them. Now, again, to Supriya's point, things change and things get mercurial. But for the time being, you know, we have GM closing. We have auto plants that are looking to do business elsewhere, and that is a major pain. Steel and aluminum plants at the same time.
Well, and empty shipping containers going into the United States. I mean, Jordan, maybe he can transform the tariffs because he's transformational. But, you know, he is coming to the G7. President Trump and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, are going to go to Canada-U.S. I mean, that was in doubt until yesterday.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think, of course, that's going to become another site of discussion about this tariff war, because, of course, now Europe has been pulled into this conversation in a way that they weren't previously, because Canada, we've been out in front. We were really the first target of the tariffs, but now we have company. And so I actually think that will be a really important opportunity to apply some coordinated pressure to Trump. You know, as you've noted, like Trump appears to be susceptible to domestic political pressure on this, and there have been some small changes. So with the combined forces of other G7 countries and Canada applying that pressure together, I think that, there could hopefully be some movement there. But it's a long time to the midterms. Like, it's a very long stretch to wait out U.S. domestic political pressure to solve this problem. And I think that is a challenge there. And that's why it's going to be important to engage with our allies in the EU to lay that pressure on, because we can't just wait out the clock on that.
Well, you would hope the pain in the economy would start being felt by the summer, and that would put pressure on them. But, Supriya, last word on this topic, and then we're going to switch gears to the Conservatives.
I mean, look, I think I agree largely with the rest of my co-panelists here. The one thing I would say on the G7, what's going to be interesting is just how much that communique ends up being watered down, and how much oxygen in the room that was supposed to be devoted to other policy issues that would be considered in normal times to be pressing for, the G7 meeting is going to get pushed to the back burner now, because, economic issues and these tariffs are going to be front and center for a whole host of countries.
Yeah, well, maybe it all just gets solved before the 15th of June when they can just focus on the other. Wouldn't that be great?